So today we're going to carry on from the last video. If you didn't see that, I'll put the link up here, but we were talking about doing figure drawing, and I started by doing this lady and talking about building her up, looking at where a skeleton and a posture were. So like I said, the link's there if you want to see that one first before we do this one. So because I've been doing it, I thought we'd carry on and talk a little bit about watercolour and adding some colours to this lady. So firstly, don't feel when you're doing something from a photograph or whatever source material that you have to do it in the colours that's there. You're making a picture, it's entirely up to you what colours you want to be doing it in. So when we're thinking about figures and the clothing and things like that, keep that in mind when you're doing backgrounds and things as well. If it's a sunny, if she's wearing this summer dress and this summer hat and big sunglasses, we're going to assume it's not raining, it's not windy, it's not going to be dark, so we're going to need a lot of light in the painting. Similarly, if you're doing a snow scene, you're not going to put someone in there that hasn't got perhaps a nice big woolly jumper and pair of boots on. So, you know, think about the clothing, because you might want to alter the clothing of the people that you're painting, but make sure that it fits with the rest of the picture. So I'm going to do her first, and then perhaps just put a tiny bit of background in behind her. And we'll start at the top and work down. It's quite a good way of not resting your hand on what you've done. So in the picture she's got a white hat, and white's quite difficult because it's how do you make it show up and how do you get the shadows into white. Some of the shadow colours are sort of influenced by the other colours around, and if you look, most of the shadow colours are sort of bluey green greys that she's got in that hat. So we'll just mix up a tiny bit of blue to begin with, only a tiny amount, and quite a pale blue, because one way that we can make her hat stand out is by putting a darker background behind it, which we'll do later. So a very light wash of cobalt blue, and again with your watercolours, don't forget that they're going to dry a lot lighter than they go on. So this is just to add a touch of shadow in one or two places on a hat. So it's obviously more shady underneath. And also it's going to emphasise that shape as well. And then we'll leave that for now, and we'll come down to her face. So first of all, for a skin colour, I'm going to use a touch of yellow ochre and a tiny touch of permanent alizarin crimson. Now you must be careful not to put too much red in. More yellow than red in this mix. And plenty of water as well. And I'm actually going to go right over the glasses as well, because we're going to come back over them. This part of the face is very much in shadow because she's got that hat on that's casting a shadow on her face. So we're just going to put, wherever she's got skin showing, we're going to just pop this one wash over the whole lot. So keeping this very simple today. And allowing some areas to dry before we come back and put another layer on. I'm just looking what number brush it is. It's a size 3, so quite a small one. So we can fill this, and she's got just her toes showing as well. Again, she's got white shoes on, but you could change the colour of her shoes if you wanted to. So we won't do any more on the skin just now, we'll let that dry, so we'll move on to the dress. Now on the picture she's got a red dress, and actually I think we will stick to the red, make it quite, actually we use the same red that we used in the skin, so we'll go back for that permanent alizarin crimson there. Again, plenty of water, because we will go darker and put some shadows in afterwards once it's dried. And we'll just cover the whole thing to begin with. And if you see any highlights that you'd like to leave some white paper, then just leave the paper dry where you want those highlights. So in one or two places the sun's just catching the side of a dress there, you might want to just leave some white paper. And at the bottom where the sun's, it's quite a chiffony material, so you need to keep that feeling of it being quite light. And the reason when it's quite a light material, that's why it's clinging to her at this side, because it's not got that weight. Quite in shadow down this side, so we won't leave any white there. Oops. See, I've gone over onto her arm there, so just with a damp brush, very carefully do that, and that has to be a damp brush, not a wet brush. And apply the paint in the direction of the fabric if you can. When I'm demonstrating to you, I'm always conscious about keeping my hand out of the way of the camera and things, but with you, when you're doing it, you might want to move your paper around, get your arm into a comfortable position so that you can go in the direction of what you're painting. Okay, so already she's starting to come together a little bit. So as we've been doing that dress, the face should have been drying a touch. So whilst it's continuing to dry, I'm going to just make up quite a dark mix now for the glasses. And her hair, she's got very dark hair, so I'll probably use the same mix. So some French ultramarine and some burnt sienna. And not just as watery as the previous mixes that we had. I'll start by putting her hair in. You can just see the hair coming down this side of her face a little touch, and above her glasses there. And then she's got it sort of tied around the back of her neck. It disappears into her hat there, and then she's got it tied. And then with that same mix, I'm just going to get a touch of it into the next part of my palette and add a little bit of water to that, so it's a bit more watery than that hair. And I'm going to start and build up these glasses a touch. And later on we will need to go quite a bit darker in places there as well. Often when you're doing glasses you need to leave some white because you've got that shine on them. Here, like I said before, because it's underneath her hat, you can see there's no highlights really on this part of her face at all. It's all quite dark. The only place that she's got a highlight is going to be down that side of her cheek and her neck. And I'm going to go back to that skin colour now, and I'm going to put a tiny touch more of the red into that mix. So the same mix, just with a touch more, a little bit more red. And I'm going to put that where her lips are. You can see it's not too bright, and that's going to, again, fade as it dries as well. Just made them a little bit too big. So it's just a hint. And then some of the places where it's slightly more red. So if you look at the painting, look at the back of her hand, it's more red. Down the front of her feet. And also we've got some shadow as well, so we'll put some shadows on again when this is dried. Just seem to have got far too much on her lips. Let me just come back to that. Seems to have spread. That's better. And just, you can't really see her face too well under that hat, but I'll just put a little bit of pink there where her cheekbone, where we know that her cheekbone is, just to emphasise that. Maybe a little bit there as well. Now while that dries, I'm going to come back to the dress again. I'm going to use that same red mix. This time I'm going to add a little bit of the ultramarine, or actually, no, I'll add the cobalt to it. So the same colour that we used for the hat, I'm just going to add a touch of that into it. Just going to make that look more of a shadow colour and a bit darker. So now look at the picture and look where it's darker, and pick up some of those shapes of where the fabric's creased. And where it's more in shadow. And still, if you go back to thinking about what we talked about in the last video, still think about her underneath and the shape of her, because this fabric's draping around her. You know, you've not got to just think in terms of painting the dress, you're still painting the person underneath, and it's even her legs here. You know, you should sort of be able to see the shape of her legs there coming through, because it's such a clingy fabric. So all the time think about painting around that figure and those shapes. Particularly here, you can see the shape of her hip, and the shadow comes up to where her hip would be in here. I'm just putting some of those, you probably can't see on the picture, but it's a sort of a pleated fabric, so I want to just emphasise some of those lines. And go over one or two of the pencil lines that I've already got there to get that shape of the dress. And again, we'll leave that to dry. I'm going to go down to her shoes now. Like I said, the white, but actually they're pretty boring. I think I'm going to make them a colour. So let's give her some yellow shoes, brighten the whole thing up a bit. So just a tiny touch of cadmium yellow, not too strong. Just a little bit more interesting than having a pair of white shoes on. Now I'm going to think about the shadow colours on the skin. So again, with that same little bit of a wash, which had the yellow and the pink. I'm going to add a tiny touch of that cobalt blue, and I mean a tiny touch, not a lot. And then I'm going to look at where she's most in the shade. So this arm's quite in the shade, I think because she's got it so close into her body. And as you're doing this, look at the shape of the muscles and the bones and things again, to think about which part of the arm you're seeing. She's actually got it facing you, so you're seeing the inside of her elbow, not the outside of her elbow there. And her feet are quite in shadow because of the dress there. If I look back at a shoe, I've made a mistake. She needs the sole of a shoe putting on. We've got a toe touching the ground there, so she needs that extra little bit of yellow just underneath. So you can correct your drawing with your painting as you go along. I'm actually going to put a little bit of yellow on her hat, just to sort of indicate that the sun's maybe shining on that shape, and again just picking up the shape of the hat, but that's only a tiny touch. Now I'm going to go a little bit darker with that colour that we had earlier, and this time I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Grey to the mix to make it nice and dark. She's got very dark hair and very dark glasses. It's not covering the whole hair, just emphasising one or two of the shapes of that, the way she's got it tied around the back of her neck. And it's very dark here underneath the brim of her hat, so getting that shadow in there. And the top of her glasses. I'm just going to now get a little bit of water, clean my brush out, and with a damp brush just blend that down into the rest of the glasses, because the glasses are darker at the top than they are further down. The light's getting more into them further down, so just sort of blend that in. And again, sharpen up that edge a little bit there. I just feel like we do need a little bit more pink on those lips. We just put that there. She has perhaps got lipstick on. It's better. Okay, and again I'm going to put some more blue into that pink. Make a few more shadows. So this time looking at where it's absolutely the darkest on this figure, on the skirt rather. Okay, and I think we'll probably leave that for the figure. Just very simple. I just wanted to talk through those colours. So we haven't used a lot of colour. So we've used alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, cobalt blue, French ultramarine, burnt sienna, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of Payne's grey. So now I'm going to put a tiny bit of background in, but not a lot. So, like I said, we want something quite dark behind her to show her hat up, or to show her up really, because she's really quite light and sunny. So I think I'm going to put some green behind her, as if she's got some trees behind her maybe. So I'm using a sap green. I'm just going to again add a little touch of red to that. And carefully, I know it's quite a big brush, but carefully go around her hat and her hair. Can you see by using a darker colour behind how then the hat shows up more? And you may want to put a full background in with a bit more detail than this. But when you're doing a figure study like this also, you perhaps want to keep the interest on the figure and not make an over complicated background. So using this big brush just so that it's covered quite quickly and you're not getting bored watching me do all these fiddly bits. And as I come down to the bottom there, I'm going to just change and put some of that blue or a bluey grey back in. In fact, I'll use some of that grey that we had earlier and put more water in it and pop that along the bottom, just so that it looks as if she's standing on something. She's, you know, there's an actual pavement or something there. And then the yellow that we used just to add a touch of sunshine to her hat, I'm going to just pop a bit of that in as well whilst it's still wet. Just give us that impression of it being a very summery day, so we've got a lot of yellow in the leaves that are behind her. And by putting that strong colour next to her skin there, that makes that show up more. Okay, so I think that's enough background. Like I say, you might want to do a more realistic background to actually draw. If you can see this, we've actually got the shape of the pavement there and there's some railings and things behind her, but just whatever you want to do. So the emphasis really was on the figure and practicing the figure drawing and getting a little bit of shadow into the skin tones. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. Of course, the level of detail that you put in is entirely up to you. You could carry on more with the creases in the fabrics and the hat and the shape of the glasses. You could put more detail in as you go along. Use some finer brushes to get those lines in. But I quite like it, leaving it quite loose like that and with that loose background. So if you have any questions, if you want to pop those in the comments below, and we'll perhaps come back another day and talk more about skin tones and maybe do a full face and look at the paint colours that we would use for the skin tones there. So hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.